Hey, good afternoon, friends. Welcome back to the Daily Dose. We're here for day number 12 of the Daily Dose. We're glad that you guys were able to join us. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Adam, and this is...
Mine.
Hi, guys. And our scripture reading for today is going to be...
Genesis 38 through 40 and Psalms 12.
That's right. Genesis 38 through 40 and Psalm number 12. There's quite a bit of stuff that's going on in the scripture today. Where we left off last time in chapter 37, we had started on the beginning of Joseph's story. Going into Genesis chapter 38, we take a brief break from Joseph's story before we jump back into it in the following chapter. This chapter, 38, follows Judah, who's one of Joseph's brothers. So after Judah, gets done with his brothers and the whole plot where they sell Joseph into slavery, some time goes by, and Judah decides he's going to go off, move somewhere, find a wife, and get married, which he does. He has 3 children. His oldest child, the name is and Judah ends up arranging a marriage for once gets old enough. So marries a woman named Tamar, and he is supposed to be, getting her pregnant so they can continue on the family line, so on and so forth. But the scripture tells us that this guy was wicked, and the Lord took his life. I don't know exactly what that means or what that looked like. If God physically, snapped his fingers, so to speak, and just made this guy heart stop, or if he was attacked by a wild animal. I don't know what happened. We don't know. But something happened, and the Lord took his life. In those days, if I were to have a brother, and my brother got married, and before my brother could have kids with his wife, if my brother died, it would be my responsibility to marry his wife, who would have been my sister-in-law, and to have kids with her so that the family name can be continued through his wife. That's just kind of how they did things back then. So, that being the case, after was dealt with, so to speak, by the Lord, his younger brother was then supposed to take Tamar, marry her, and have kids, continue the family line that way. This brother, the younger sibling, was apparently wicked as well, and the Bible tells us that the Lord took his life. So that just left one more younger brother who was apparently too young to get married yet. So Judah tells Tamar, hey, look, their youngest brother, I'll let you have him as your husband, and he can have kids with you. He's too young right now, though. It's not the time. You need to go back home, wait. When the time comes, I'll bring him to you. Y'all can get married, and we'll continue the process. However, we find out that Judah had no intention of doing that at all. Judah was afraid that his first 2 sons had been killed by the Lord. He was afraid that this one was going to get killed too. So he was not trying to have it. I guess he never took the youngest son around once the time came. So Tamar ends up getting a little bit irritated and frustrated, and she concocts a divisive way to try to get pregnant while still remaining within their family bloodline. So she dresses up as a prostitute, and she goes and hangs out somewhere that she knew Judah would be visiting. I guess she covers up her face, makes it so that she's not recognizable, and she propositions Judah, who agrees. So Judah ends up having sex with her, thinking she's a prostitute, not realizing who she really is. And when it's said and done, she ends up getting pregnant. Everything comes to light, and Judah gets busted. So not a very positive story, not a very good example. And that's kind of how they close out chapter 38, moving back onto Joseph's story in chapter 39. So it's kind of interesting that one little chapter they just kind of slipped in there about Judah and what went on in Judah's life during that period of time. They just briefly go into it and then jump right back out into Joseph's story. So ponder that, think about that, and if you're curious, do some research online, look it up on some commentaries and see what commentators say. But continuing on, so when we get to chapter 39, we're back on Joseph's story. So Joseph basically got sold off into slavery by his brothers. they would take slaves to an auction the slaves off, and people would pay for the slaves based on how strong the slaves were, or based on how smart that they were, how many languages they knew, things of that nature. So one of the leaders of Pharaoh's kingdom, this guy named Potiphar, he was kind of like Pharaoh's right-hand man. He ends up purchasing Joseph, and he puts Joseph in charge of some stuff around his household. And Joseph has such a good work ethic that he ends up basically moving up the ranks. And Potiphar sees that this guy Joseph is reliable, he's trustworthy, and he's doing a great job for him. So Potiphar promotes Joseph and basically puts Joseph in charge of everything that he owns. He says, look, you're doing such a great job. I'm going to put you in charge of everything. All you got to do is just stay away from my wife. That's the only thing that's off limits. Everything else, do with as you see fit. And Joseph did, and he did a great job. The problem, though, is that Potiphar's wife apparently had a thing for Joseph. The scripture tells us that she made some passes at Joseph. She was constantly flirting with him to the point where Joseph started to keep his distance from her. And he would go about doing his household chores and duties in such a way that he could avoid contact with her as much as possible. But we get to a point where I guess nobody else is around in Potiphar's mansion, in his quarters, whatever it is. And there was nobody there except for Potiphar's wife and Joseph. So she makes a move on him again, except this time it's more than just flirting. She actually grabs a hold of his cloak, like she's, I guess, trying to pull him into bed with her, and she says, hey, you need to come and sleep with me. And Joseph got so freaked out that he just jerked back, and when he did, she inadvertently ripped off his clothes, and he goes storming out of there naked, and he goes and runs and hides and tries to find some clothes and just remove himself from the situation as quick as possible. So he gets thrown in prison because she accuses him of sexual assault. And, of course, she is the leader, the wife of the guy who's, one step down from being the leader of Egypt. So, of course, everybody's going to believe her over Joseph. So Joseph does get thrown in jail, and he ends up being there for a little while, but we'll continue that when we get to the scripture for the next day, tomorrow. But what I wanted to touch on, and I did go into a little bit more of a detailed summary here than I normally do, so I'll keep my point of interest a little bit short. But the point that I found very interesting and important is Joseph, how he fled when he was tempted by Potiphar's wife. He hightailed it out of there. There was no hesitation. He was put in a place where there was temptation in front of him. Men in particular oftentimes can be tempted a little bit more easily in the area of lust and sexuality than women. Not always the case, but generally speaking, men are creatures of their eyes, and it's not very difficult to get a man excited about something. So she was doing her best to try to get him in bed with her, and he realized, look, this is not a situation I need to be in. This won't glorify God. This is not going to honor, Potiphar, my employer. This is not good. I need to get out of here quick. He didn't even entertain it for 1 second. He could have said, well, let me see what I can get away with. Maybe just a kiss, or, maybe Potiphar won't find out. He did not entertain the idea in any way, shape, and form, friends. And that is what we have to do when we are confronted with temptation. We have to flee from sin. We have to run. We have to get out of there as quick as we can. Because the more that we flirt with temptation, the more likely it is that we will eventually give in. So those are the thoughts for the day. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a good afternoon. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, whatever, let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.